Changes are needed with the Phoenix Suns as we seen this team go on a disappointing losing streak without Kevin Durant, and some trade rumors are escalating within this squad from the fan base, from the media, people wanting some necessary things to go down. So we're going to look at some possible moves that GM James Jones, Matt Ishbia could look at, and maybe some of these players could be bigger benefactors in Mike Budenholzer's offense. We're going to look at all of that and more on this episode of Suns Digest. I'm Bruce Velez. Without further ado, let's dive into the video at hand. Make sure to grab a snack. And like I said in the introduction, this is necessary and changes are needed in Phoenix. As we saw the Phoenix Suns obviously get off to a hot start this season, but with dealing with some injuries to Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, they went on a big losing streak. And the Suns have been a dysfunctional team without Durant so far. And with their last two recent losses being up against a Pelicans team with 4 wins and an Orlando Magic squad who was out without 2 of their best players. And the Suns once again choke in the third quarter. There are clearly some defensive issues and some big man issues that need to be addressed with this Suns roster if they want to compete like Matt Ishbia says. So we're going to be looking at all of that in this video. Like I said, the Suns fall to 1-9 now without Kevin Durant following that loss with the Orlando Magic. And as Evan Cedery says, this Suns team wants to be competing and is going to make some moves if they want to compete. Now, obviously, with this roster fully healthy, they have been pretty solid. But even with that, we can see with these problems coming through now that if they keep this roster together, it is not going to go fundamentally sound throughout the regular season and the playoffs if they're already running into this many injuries so far. And if we want to look at this, obviously we can see from Suns are better. The Suns, like I mentioned, off to that hot start, and just 1 month later, already in a complete disarray. And if we want to look at this tweet from John Voita from Suns Jam, Bright Side of the Sun, we can obviously see that you're the GM, fix the Suns, go, asking the fans what they would like to do. And as we look at this roster, we can see it's going to be very difficult for this team to make moves, but we're going to look at some possible moves that the Suns could get down and could do to help benefit this roster in this video. But looking at that, we kind of got to go over this roster. As we know, the Suns are in the second apron. Players like Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker are all on $50 million contracts. So it would be very difficult for the Suns to move off said star to replace him with another star. I know I've seen some people come into these comments asking for Giannis Antetokounmpo, but something like that is not going to be possible for the Suns to do, especially even in the middle of the season. And I don't see the Suns doing that either. I see the Suns going either in one or two directions, in a full rebuild, or them going and competing. And with Matt Ishbia's voices of wanting to compete and with wanting to extend Kevin Durant long term in Phoenix, the push to compete is now, and there's no need to go and sell at the deadline. That's a question for next season. But with the Suns, honestly, looking at their playoff chances dwindling and dwindling each and every day with one of these losses coming, changes are going to be necessary. And some of these players towards the middle of that roster, towards the end of that roster, are going to be expendable. Players like Yusuf Nurkic, Josh Okogie, possibly even players like Damian Lee or Bol Bol's names could be thrown around. And the Suns fans have to get wary about that. But to get over some rules before we look at some trades for the Suns, I do want everybody to know these 3 trade rules. So if you do spew some comments, if you do spew some players to go after, let me know down in the comment section. But these are the rules for the Suns. 1, the Suns cannot aggregate salaries, which means the Suns cannot combine salaries in a trade. Therefore, the Suns cannot take Yusuf Nurkic's salary and Josh Okogie's salary, combine it, and trade it to a team for a player making around $25 million. That would not be possible. The Suns can, though, since they do have that open roster spot, trade a player like Yusuf Nurkic away for 2 players fitting into that contract. The Suns, though, do, if they are going to make a trade because they are in the second apron, this second restriction applies to them. They cannot acquire more money than they are sending out. So if the Suns were to send out a player in Yusuf Nurkic in a deal, they cannot acquire more than that $18 million that he brings back, not to a penny. And the last rule is that the Suns cannot do multiple players in a trade. The Suns cannot do 2 for 2s. The Suns cannot do 3 for 3s. The Suns can only do 1 for 1. So it's very difficult for a Suns team to be able to facilitate some moves, get these contracts, or get players in that could help this team. But there are plentiful of moves that this team could do that I believe will help out this roster. So we're going to dive in and look at all of those now, as we're going to be looking at some possible moves the Suns can make. And I think for the Suns, they need two things, and those two things are clear and evident. They need some bigger interior presence. They need a better defensive center, someone to hold that starting position job, as we've seen Yusuf Nurkic going down with injuries left and right, and Mason Plumlee and Oso Ighodaro not being able to hold up to those standards. And we're not asking them to hold up to those standards when we signed them. Plumlee was supposed to be a backup big, supposed to mentor Oso, and Oso was supposed to take over for Plumlee in that second half, where Plumlee would resort to that third center. And we've kind of already seen that. And with that kind of transpiring with both of them playing starting minutes, that is not good. And the Suns also need some better defensive players as well. We know with this Suns team, they have been really, really bad on the defensive side. In our last video, we broke down how they almost have one of the worst defenses of all time without Kevin Durant in this lineup. And even with Kevin Durant, they still get better on the defensive side, but still needed some added help, just because that scoring from Kevin Durant obviously pushes them over the top. So those two things or what I'm going to keep an eye on. And I got 3 trades here that we could look and break down, having the Suns get better on that defensive side and also getting better in that front court. So without further ado, let's dive in and let's look at those trades. We got the stats for all the players as well to go over it. The first one will be including center Yusuf Nurkic. That's right, sending him to the Detroit Pistons for Isaiah Stewart. And this is one that has been talked about in the Suns media here and there, as we've obviously looked at Yusuf Nurkic's contract, as Suns fans have wanted him out since even since the off season. And we have seen multiple trades cooked up. Now, for Nurkic, like I mentioned, it's a little bit difficult. A team that is going to trade for Nurkic obviously is going to value him as a backup center, and making $18 million as a backup center might not be the greatest. So you have to trade him to a tanking team, a team willing to give up another center, and maybe the Pistons are that team. The Pistons could look like at a player in Yusuf Nurkic to help add their front court, playing alongside Jalen Duren to help be another additive rebounder coming off the bench to start Jalen Duren, and could free up some more room in their rotation for some of their other younger players to kind of get in at that power forward position, because Isaiah Stewart has been primarily playing there. For the Suns, Isaiah Stewart brings a very, very solid defender, great shot blocker, and a player that can also stretch and shoot the three if Budenholzer still wants to implement that with his centers. The only problem with Isaiah Stewart is he is a little bit small, standing at 6'8", and playing alongside Kevin Durant, not the biggest power forward. Obviously in size he is, but not in body mass. It would be a little bit difficult to have a front court of those guys, but I do think that Isaiah Stewart could bring more of a presence for this team, and if Oso is supposed to be that starting center to take over in the future, he could then resort to that backup in a couple years. If we want to look at the stats for both of those guys, like I said, Nurkic, 8.5 points, 10 rebounds, pretty solid on the rebounding, but besides that has been really, really bad. Hasn't been able to stay healthy, obviously, but even when he is out there on the court, even if he's not fully 100%, doesn't look like he is contributing to this Suns team and helping out, unless they're going up against some small ball lineups. He's obviously shooting atrociously from three-point range, not the greatest mid-range shooter. Well, obviously, Beef Stew is obviously shooting a little worse from three-point range. He is shooting better from the free throw percentage, and is having a pretty solid season as well on defensive side, averaging 1.3 blocks compared to Nurkic's 2.6, and averaging less turnovers compared to Nurkic would be key for the Suns, as turnovers is also another big issue with this roster. I think that this move could be the biggest one that they could go out and flip Nurkic, but there's also some other teams that might be interested in Nurkic as well. It all depends on who is really wanting to buy on a player, and obviously the Suns would have to give some draft capital as well. It's not going to be a one-for-one, but I'm just using these trades as one-for-ones with no draft capital. The Suns would have to add draft capital into that. The second one is going to be looking at a little bit of a different move, but obviously still addressing that big man group, bringing in maybe a cheaper player. Maybe the Pistons don't want to move off of Beef Stew. Maybe no team wants to take Yusuf Nurkic. Okay, that's fine. The Suns still have to add at that center group. So they go out and get a player in Nick Richards, who has been solid and key as a backup for the Hornets and has been a reliable piece at that center position. And at making $5 million, he fits into that Josh Okogie money. And for the Hornets, this could be another player they could bring in off the wing, help play alongside guys like Josh Green, Cody Martin, Brandon Miller, and could add some defensive pressure to that backup unit. For the Hornets also, if they don't necessarily see a long-term future with Nick Richards, trading for a player Josh Okogie could be helpful as he is on a non-guaranteed contract for next season, which would allow the Charlotte Hornets to be able to waive Josh Okogie and get free of his dead money. That would be nice for the Hornets if they want to go and use, if they feel like they're not going to get any benefit off Nick Richards, saving some money for next season and using that money to go and sign another big free agent in free agency, or use it to get some other pieces around the edges, or even use it in a trade to have some flexible cap space. That could be helpful for the Hornets in the future. Or Okogie could find himself a long-term home on that bench. He's been a solid defender, has been a pretty great three-point shooter as well, his best offensive season so far in the NBA with the Suns this season, and that could contribute going to a Charlotte Hornet team that could use that scoring off the bench. Now, Richards would provide a solid backup big, like I said, could fill in at that center spot. And if you do keep Nurkic, takes that step over Oso Iguodala and Mason Plumlee, which then gives the Suns some solidified big man protections and help. If we want to look at the stats on both of those guys as well, we can obviously look. Josh Okogie, like I mentioned, been playing an unreal season for the Suns, having a fantastic three-point shooting season and field goal season. But Nick Richards has been dominant, averaging 11.5 points, at least 10 rebounds, 1 point and assist, almost 2 blocks per game for the Suns, or for the Hornets, and shooting 62% from the field. This is the traditional big man that the Suns would want, a guy that could come in and just do everything around the edges, be a solid defender, rim protector for this starting team, and someone that could find himself a long-term home in Phoenix if so. And those are two that I do really like. But one to kind of throw out there as well, possibly as a trade, is one with the Portland Trailblazers, a team that the Suns were obviously engaged with uh, last season when they went and acquired Bradley Beal, or did the Drew Holiday trade with DeAndre Ayton, excuse me, not for Bradley Beal. But the Suns interested in getting another big here in Duop Reath to replace a young guy who hasn't really been able to come off the bench in Bull. Now, for the Blazers, obviously getting a young untapped potential piece in Bol would be nice for their young rebuild. And for the Suns, bringing in a player in Duop Reath could be big. Now, Duop obviously was was a rookie last year, but I believe was 27 or 28. So obviously not a young rookie, but a player who could make a high impact player, be a high impact player off the bench. He was a solid rebounder, solid defender for this Blazers team, but has fallen in that rotation, obviously, with Robert Williams being healthy, with them drafting Donovan Clingan, with them having DeAndre Ayton and trying to gauge their trade value. A player like Duop Reath has fallen through the cracks and hasn't gotten much playing time for the Blazers. And a player like Bol has also fallen through the cracks for the Suns and hasn't gotten much playing time. So maybe a swap of these lesser contracts could benefit both sides. Duop helping that contending Suns team, as you know, a low value guy off the bench that can be a high impact plug piece. And that's if the Suns obviously can't get trades done with Nurkic, can't get trades done with Josh Okogie, or maybe they can get a trade done with that, but they look to add another piece there and still add to this big man group with adding a player in Duop. I personally think that this is the best trade that the Suns could go after and get. And if we want to look at their stats, obviously, we can see Bol averaging 3.3 points, 1.6 rebounds, 0.1 assist, obviously, on the year. And if we want to look, 3 point. Oh, we do not have. I apologize. We do not have Duop's stats here, but Duop hasn't been playing much for the Suns, or for the Blazers anyways, hasn't been given much that playing time. So I think he would have an increased role on this Suns roster. But like I mentioned, Suns need changes. These would help out their big man group. Adding players like Isaiah Stewart, adding players like Duop Reath, adding players like Nick Richards could be very, very great value players for this Suns team. And yes, they've been moving off of players like Josh Okogie, who has been valuable, but players like Bol haven't really fit in with this team. Player like Yusuf Nurkic hasn't really emerged himself. So truly, I do think that these three moves would be the best. And even though if the Suns don't do all three, if they do one or if they do two, I think it will definitely help out their core, and I think it would be very beneficial for the Suns. I think the best one, in my opinion, is doing the Bol for Duop Reath. Helps out the Blazers get a young player, helps get a player that's logged in that front court, get out of there and help out the Suns as well. And it's a little bit on the cheaper side. Still allows the Suns to move Nurkic, move Okogie for another piece as well. But like I said, let me know what you think down below in the comment section, how you guys ultimately feel about these trades, about the Suns, and about this team. And I really do appreciate all the love and support you guys have been giving us. We are going to kick up the weekly live streams over on here. I just started them back up on Celtics Digest, where I also worked last week, and we're going to start doing them over here on Suns Digest. So let you guys know those will be coming. Make sure to stay tuned for that. And if you're at this point in the video and you're still not subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button to help us get to our goal of 2,000 subscribers. But you guys have been absolutely fantastic. I appreciate you guys so much, and have a great rest of your day. Peace out and go Phoenix Suns.